Every Veterans Day, like clockwork, an older man in a faded military jacket walked into Gracie's diner. He never gave his name, just ordered apple pie and black coffee. Always sat in the same corner booth, never stayed longer than 20 minutes. Then he'd tip $20 on a $5 tab and vanish. No stories, no small talk, just a nod. But this year, he left something behind. And what the waitress found changed everything she thought she knew about silence, memory, and the invisible battles people carry alone. Gracie Martinez had turned 29 last spring, and she'd been working the early morning shift at the diner for 3 years now. Long enough to know the regulars by heart, but not so long that she'd lost her curiosity about people. She knew Mrs. Peterson took her coffee with 2 sugars and a story about her grandchildren. She knew Tommy, the truck driver, always ordered the same breakfast but never ate the toast. She knew which customers wanted conversation and which ones needed to be left alone with their thoughts. The diner itself was nothing special. Red vinyl booths, checkered linoleum floors, and the smell of bacon grease that had soaked into the walls over decades. But it was the kind of place where people felt safe being themselves, even if that self was tired, lonely, or lost. Gracie wasn't new to the job, but she wasn't a lifer either. She'd learned the rhythms of the place, who liked extra cream in their coffee, who avoided eye contact when they ordered, who lingered too long over cold pancakes because they had nowhere else to go. Most customers were predictable in their unpredictability. But the veteran? He was different. He stood out precisely because he didn't try to. His silence had weight, but it wasn't the cold kind that pushed people away. It was more like the quiet of someone who had learned that words sometimes carried too much pain to be spoken aloud. Every the 11th of November, he would appear. Same time, same booth, same order. Gracie would approach his table with her usual warmth, offering the kind of genuine smile that made people feel seen. He never returned it, but he never looked annoyed by it either. There was something in his eyes, not gratitude exactly, but acknowledgement. As if her smile was a small light in a place that had been dark for a very long time. She found herself looking forward to his annual visit. There was something reassuring about his consistency, his quiet ritual. In a world that seemed to spin faster every year, he was a constant. He never missed the 11th of November. Until this one. That morning started like any other Veterans Day. Gracie had even made sure they had fresh apple pie, though she would never have admitted to anyone that she'd done it specifically for him. She kept glancing at the corner booth as she served other customers, wiping down tables that were already clean, refilling coffee cups that were still half full. By 10 o'clock, she was checking the door every few minutes. By 11, she was making excuses to walk past his usual booth. The breakfast rush came and went, and still no sign of the man in the faded military jacket. At noon, when the lunch crowd began filtering in, Gracie felt something cold settle in her stomach. Something was wrong. She couldn't explain how she knew. After all, she barely knew the man beyond his coffee preference, but 3 years of watching someone's rituals creates a kind of intuition. When the lunch rush finally died down around 2 o'clock, Gracie found herself walking toward the corner booth with a cleaning rag, even though no one had sat there all day. The vinyl seat looked strange without his familiar figure hunched over a cup of black coffee. She ran the rag across the already clean table surface, her movements automatic while her mind wandered. That's when she saw it. A small white envelope tucked between the salt and pepper shakers. No name on the front, just one word written in sharp block letters: waitress. Gracie's hands trembled as she picked it up. The envelope was heavier than it looked, and she could feel something besides paper inside. She glanced around the diner, a few regulars nursing late coffees, old Pete reading his newspaper in the back booth. Everything normal except for this envelope that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She slipped into the booth and carefully opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, the kind you'd find in any drugstore notebook, and an old photograph. The photo showed a much younger version of the man she knew, wearing a crisp military uniform and smiling broadly. Beside him stood a beautiful woman with kind eyes and a little boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, grinning up at the camera. They looked happy, complete. The letter was written in the same careful block letters as the envelope. Gracie's eyes moved to the first line, and her breath caught. "If you're reading this, I didn't make it this year. But I needed you to know. The diner seemed to fade around her as she read. The clatter of dishes, the murmur of conversations, the hiss of the coffee machine, it all became background noise as his words pulled her into a world of pain she had never imagined. He wrote about the fire that had taken his family 10 years ago. A simple house fire, started by a faulty wire in the basement while he was overseas, finishing his final tour. His wife Sarah and his son Michael had died from smoke inhalation in their sleep. They never even woke up, the investigators said, as if that was supposed to make it better. He wrote about the guilt that ate at him every day, how he had survived mortar attacks and roadside bombs only to lose everything to an accident at home. How he felt like he was wearing a mask made of ash, walking through a world that looked normal but felt hollow. How he'd started wandering from town to town because staying in one place too long made the walls close in. But every year, on the 11th of November, he returned to this booth. Not because it was Veterans Day, but because it was the anniversary of something else entirely. The last time he'd felt like himself. You never asked for my story, the letter continued. That's what I liked about you. You saw me sitting here, broken and hollow, but you didn't push. You didn't try to fix me with small talk or pity. You just smiled the same warm smile every year, even when I couldn't smile back. That smile meant more than I ever said. It reminded me that there was still kindness in the world, even if I couldn't feel it anymore. Gracie read the letter twice, then 3 times, trying to absorb words that seemed too heavy for the thin paper they were written on. Her coffee sat untouched, growing cold, as she tried to understand how someone could carry so much pain and still show up, still try to connect in the only way he knew how. But the letter wasn't finished. At the bottom of the page, in slightly shakier handwriting, he had added more. I know this might seem strange, coming from someone who never even told you his name. It's Robert, by the way, Robert Chen. I wanted you to know that because what I'm about to tell you is important. I've been watching you these past 3 years. Not in a creepy way, just the way you notice someone who reminds you of goodness when you've forgotten what that looks like. You move through this place like you care about every person who walks through that door. You refill coffee without being asked. You remember how people like their eggs. You smile at the grumpy ones until they smile back. But more than that, you look like someone who wants to do more. I see it in how you watch the news on the diner's television, when stories about nurses or teachers come on. I see it in how you talk to Mrs. Peterson about her grandson's surgery, asking the right questions, really listening. You have healing in you, even if you don't know it yet. Gracie's heart was pounding now, but she kept reading. Folded at the bottom of this envelope is a receipt for a prepaid fund I set up in your name at Millfield Community College. It's enough to cover tuition and books for their nursing program. I did some research. They have evening classes, so you could keep working if you need to. This is me doing what I couldn't do for my son. Michael wanted to be a doctor when he grew up. He used to patch up his stuffed animals and line them up like patients in a hospital. I never got to help him reach that dream, but maybe I can help you reach yours. Don't feel bad about taking it. The money's just been sitting there anyway, and dead men don't need bank accounts. Use it. Become the person I can see you want to be. Make the world a little bit better. The way your smile made my world a little bit better every the 11th of November. Gracie's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the paper. She reached into the envelope and found the receipt, just as he'd promised. The sum was more than she'd ever imagined, enough not just for nursing school, but for books, supplies, everything she would need. She sat in that corner booth long after her shift had officially ended, the letter spread out before her, trying to make sense of it all. The man who had never spoken more than a dozen words to her had been watching, listening, caring in ways she never could have guessed. And now he was gone. But he'd left her with something that could change everything. The tears came slowly at first, then in waves that made her shoulders shake. She pressed her face into her hands, overwhelmed by the weight of his gift and the tragedy of his story. Around her, the diner continued its quiet rhythm, but she felt suspended outside of time, holding the pieces of a life she'd never known existed. Gracie, you okay, honey? She looked up to see Maria, the evening shift manager, standing beside the booth with concern written across her face. Behind her, Pete and a couple of the other regulars had noticed her tears. Gracie started, then stopped. How do you explain something like this? Instead, she held out the letter. Maria slid into the booth beside her and read silently, her expression changing from concern to amazement to sorrow. When she finished, she passed it to Pete, who read it with the careful attention of someone who understood loss. Word spread quietly through the small group of evening customers, and soon there was a circle of people around the corner booth, all of them connected by the story of a man they'd barely noticed. "I remember him," said Mrs. Peterson, who had stayed late for her weekly bridge game in the back room. "Always so polite. Never said much, but he had kind eyes. He left a $20 tip every time," added Pete. "I always wondered about that." As Gracie listened to these small remembrances, she began to understand something that took her breath away. Robert Chen hadn't just been anchoring himself to this place once a year, he'd been studying it, learning about the people who worked here, caring about them in ways they never realized. Every cup of coffee she'd poured, every smile she'd offered, every moment of simple human kindness had mattered more than she'd ever known. He wasn't just remembering his lost family in this booth, he was building a new kind of family, one made of quiet connections and unspoken understanding. She had unknowingly been his lighthouse, and now, even in death, he was trying to be hers. "What are you going to do?" Maria asked gently. Gracie looked down at the nursing school receipt, then at the photograph of Robert with his wife and son. They looked so happy, so full of hope for the future. She thought about Michael, who had wanted to heal people, and about Robert, who had spent 10 years carrying a pain so deep it had nearly erased him. "I'm going to make him proud," she said quietly. The following Veterans Day, the corner booth wasn't empty. Gracie placed a fresh cup of black coffee and a slice of apple pie where he always sat. No one dared sit there, not that day. Each year after, someone added something: a flag pin, a folded napkin with a kind note, once even a child's drawing of a soldier. And every year, Gracie tells his story not with drama or spectacle, but with reverence. About a man who showed up once a year, broken but brave, invisible, yet unforgettable. She's in her second year of nursing school now,